know about the world outside of your own country, outside of your own culture? How much do we know about the world, other cultures, and other countries? Today, we're going to react to an interesting video, an interview that was done between the Inside the NBA crew. In particular, we're going to be talking about Shaq, the famous Shaquille O'Neal, and what he said to Nikola Jokic. They were interviewing Nikola Jokic. He's an NBA superstar. And this interview was done some time ago in a previous NBA season. But what we see in the interview illustrates a point that maybe we all want to examine how much we actually know about the world outside of our own country, outside of our own culture. So let's go ahead and play parts of the video and we'll go ahead and react to it.
3, 14, and 10 for Big Honey. Another triple-double.
Spasiba.
Thanks a lot.
So we see Shaq just out of the blue. He starts speaking Russian to Nikola Jokic, and it's pretty impressive that Shaq took the time to study some Russian ahead of time for this interview. I'm not sure if he already knows Russian, maybe not, but it seems like he put some hard work in there to prepare to be able to say that to Nikola Jokic. Only one problem. Let's see kind of what that problem is.
A lot for joining us, man.
That's a Russian.
He's the wrong language again. You
My bad.
We apologize.
So the problem is Nikola Jokic is not Russian. He's from Serbia. Totally different country, totally different language. And what's pretty bad about it is Jokic is famous. He was famous at this time, huge superstar. Anybody who pays even moderate attention to the NBA knows that he's from Serbia. And so Shaq, for him to not know that he was from Serbia, to think that maybe he was from Russia, that he spoke Russian, kind of maybe gives off that idea that a lot of people think Americans have, that all those countries over there near Russia are the same as Russia and they speak Russian. So that was pretty bad. Let's go ahead and see how they react to Shaq's error, how Shaq reacts to his own error. Let's continue with the video.
He's not Russian. I thought he was Russian.
No, he's not Russian. No, he's not
from
Russian.
Serbia. You know. Okay. Oh, that's right. Serbia. That's right.
Oh my God.
My bad.
Oh, that went well.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Right.
No, it's our pleasure.
So you see Jokic, Jokic is one of the nicest players in the NBA, real nice guy, real kind guy. That's the attitude he gives off. And, even right there, he seemed a little disappointed. He told Shaq, you know this. You know I'm from Serbia. You can tell that he was a little disappointed. He just left the interview there a bit abruptly. And maybe you can kind of get the idea that perhaps that wasn't the first time Jokic has received that sort of opinion from somebody, that just assuming that he was Russian. So let's continue and see how Shaq and the rest of the crew react to the error.
You should have just asked him how.
Nice touch.
Yeah, nice touch. Hey, how was it growing up in Moscow? I'm not from Russia.
You are a piece of work, man. Inside the NBA is
like Drago to me from Rocky Ford.
Oh, my.
Well, I thought he was Russian. He looked like Drago.
Serbian.
So Shaq decides to finish it off by saying that he looks like a Russian character from one of the Rocky movies. Not a great way to finish it off. That's pretty bad. But you can kind of tell throughout the interview, after it becomes revealed that he made that error, that he's a little embarrassed. You can kind of tell by his mannerisms, his facial expressions, even the way he says some of the things. So he's a little embarrassed, not the worst person in the world, but probably made it a little bit worse with that last comment there. We have here on the screen some results of a Gallup study. Because while Shaq was pretty bad in this particular instance, he's probably not the only one. And this quote here from this Gallup study is from an article on the Spanish Sports and Spice website. There's an article on this website that highlights the origin of that study and where that originally came from, helping us to examine all of us, just how much we know about the world, other countries, other cultures, and maybe we all are a little bit like Shaquille O'Neal in some ways and can get a little bit better. So the article here is entitled Ivy League Ignorance. Ivy League Ignorance. And it highlights this quote that was published by National Geographic. National Geographic. It was a Gallup study commissioned by the Council on Foreign Relations titled U.S. Adults' Knowledge About the World. This study reported that at one point it had reported that only 55% of adults surveyed knew that South Africa was the country that had apartheid as its official national policy. That was from a study done before. And this article here from the National Geographic makes mention of that. But that's still pretty bad, even whenever that occurred. 55%, only 55% of US adults knew about apartheid and that was connected to South Africa. So that's pretty bad. Reveals a lack of knowledge regarding the world. And then more recently, which the article National Geographic highlights, only 47% knew that Afghanistan was the country that gave safe haven to Al Qaeda before 9/11. So, this is a pretty famous group that does these studies, Gallup, and commissioned by the Council on Foreign Relations in National Geographic. Whenever we see studies like this that are so official, so thorough, respected, prestigious, and we have these results just showing that a large group of people really know a lot less than they should about the world, it's definitely something to keep in mind. In this article here on the website Spanish Sports and Spice, Ivy League Ignorance, in this article, I kind of tell on myself a little bit. When I think about my past, it makes me not want to make fun of Shaq so much because I was someone that had been accepted into different universities, was considered very smart. I had a scholarship, as the article mentions. I was a Kluge scholar, and that mentions someone who has a lot of originality and diversity that stems from different cultures. And it's interesting that some people viewed me that way, but at that same time, and in this article, I kind of tell myself, no lie, I literally thought that Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, and Hispanics were, those terms were just interchangeable. That was all the same kinds of people, no difference at all. I mean, it's just really bad, real ignorance, and I call it an Ivy League ignorance. And it just comes from the fact that, where I grew up, it was only a certain culture, maybe two different cultures, and the Hispanic culture, I just didn't have any interaction. I wasn't taught, I didn't know anything, and it was real ignorance. And it's something that's kind of embarrassing. And when we look at the what Shaq said, when we look at that report from Gallup, the Gallup study group, Shaq and I may not be the only ones. And it's just something to consider. How much do we actually know about the world and other countries? The Spanish Sports and Spice website, this article, Ivy League Ignorance, highlights this point. A lot of people, when they found out truly how I was, my ignorance, consider me like this clip right here.
You are the dumbest smart person I have ever met in my life.
The dumbest smart person he ever met in his life. So sometimes we may have this reputation of being smart and we don't know the difference between Mexicans and Puerto Ricans. The dumbest smart person. And there's this quote that the article highlights from Benjamin Franklin: being ignorant is not so much a shame as being unwilling to learn. And the idea here is, maybe Shaq, maybe myself, maybe because of our circumstances, we just weren't exposed. We didn't learn about different things. No one taught us. I mean, they're kind of excuses, but maybe if we do have those excuses and we don't know about the world because we weren't exposed to it, that's one thing. That doesn't have to reach a level of wickedness or something that we have to be so ashamed about if there is some sort of an excuse. The article highlights the point here: ignorance is defined as a lack of knowledge, yet a child isn't often called ignorant, but if anything, innocent. So when we think about that term ignorance, yes, technically it's a lack of knowledge. And Shaq and myself, we displayed ignorance. But a lot of times when we use that in common speech, you're ignorant, ignorant, we don't just use it to mean a lack of knowledge. Like a child's new to the world and doesn't know a lot of things, and we don't often call a child ignorant, if anything, innocent. And the reason is he just doesn't know better. But the other part of that quote from Benjamin Franklin: being ignorant is not so much a shame as being unwilling to learn. And the article highlights: we think ignorant he who be cocky, he who love his box, and he who mocks. So once we kind of realize we have this lack of knowledge, we realize we're ignorant, maybe we have certain excuses, whether or not the excuses are great, but once we realize it, what do we do then? Are we unwilling to learn about other cultures and other parts of the world? So it's just something to think about. Some interesting ideas here about how much we know about other cultures and the world. And if we don't know enough, we don't know a lot, well, what's our attitude? Maybe we don't need to be so embarrassed right now, but if we're unwilling to learn, we don't care at all about correcting our viewpoints, well, maybe that's something to truly be embarrassed about. So that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Until the next time, keep in mind that language is a bridge between life and spice.